This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's episode of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Adam the Jock Strozinski, and on today's show, it is busting at the seams. We've got so much to talk about. What took place over this past weekend with MJF? How's that affecting AEW? What's going on with the WWE Women's Tag Team titles? Are they dead? What's up with those? We're going to tell you about all of that, as well as there's some more fallout from the Sasha Banks and Naomi walkout. We've got the lowdown on all of that. Of course, we're going to be taking a look and giving our predictions for Hell in the Cell, which is taking place this Sunday. And we're going to take a look at all the biggest news in the wrestling world. We're going to kick this show off with our results from AEW that took place this past weekend. I want to bring in the one, the only. He is the Doc, John Macaroon. What's up, cuz?
Cuz, I want to take a moment to discuss my career and my health. I need to let everybody know that after doing this since 2013, I'm going to do this for another 10,000 episodes, baby. I ain't CM Punk. There is no botches in this voice besides all the behind-the-scenes stuff. But when the lights are on and it's time to go, wheelin' dealin', son of a gun, I am ready to record this podcast. So much energy. Listen, everybody knows that when the lights are on and I get a chance to call up Adam, whatever the bullshit that happened beforehand regarding charging things or pushing buttons and all that goes out the window. I'm excited. And especially I'm excited because I won. I'm going to spoil the teaser right away. I won the event. I'm happy. And I crushed it because it was...
You dominated.
I dominated. And it was a great pay-per-view. No botches here. And we got to talk about it too because AEW delivered on a pay-per-view but has a major problem brewing because of the fact that the wrestling now has been spotlighted by everybody pointing out the botches, and then when your world champion does it, it is a major, major problem. But overall, the pay-per-view, I loved it. It was too long, couldn't get through it all, but when you have the card set up the way it was, I thought it was set up decently. Good wrestling, great things went on throughout, and basically, I think it's safe to say, right, cuz that Double or Nothing, in essence, is the equivalent to their WrestleMania. Big cards, big events, everything cool happens, and in essence, Double or Nothing is the highlight of their show and highlight of their year, and AEW delivered.
Absolutely, you're spot on. It is they call it their anniversary show. It is their WrestleMania. It was a great show, and you're right. It was way too long. I fell asleep before the main event. I fell asleep when they were giving the package leading into the main event. I woke up, and I was so pissed that I had missed it. I had to go back and rewatch it. I know you fell asleep a little bit earlier. It was a long pay-per-view. It was really good, but it was really, really long. The show kicks off with Hookhausen defeating Tony Nese and Mark Sterling via pinfall. We then open the show with an event that we weren't even sure we were going to get. Me and you were out Saturday night together for your wife's 40th birthday party. By the way, you threw a great surprise 40th birthday party for her. And I'm sitting at the bar. My phone starts blowing up like crazy, and it's all kinds of wrestling news coming in. And I'm like, what is this? I end up walking over to you. I interrupted you. You were in the middle of a conversation. I pulled you off to the side. I was like, MJF walked out on a fan meet and greet today. There's a plane ticket that's bought. He might not be at the pay-per-view tomorrow. And you were like, what? And I was like, dude, there's so much going on right now. I'm like, this is just kind of the just the quicks of it. And you were like, holy hell. So I do want to give a quick timeline as to what took place this past weekend regarding MJF, because this ends up spilling over into Dynamite. And we're going to talk about the promo. It was absolutely bonkers what ends up taking place. But just to kind of highlight things, MJF no-shows a meet and greet on Saturday night and wasn't picking up his phone and was spotted playing slots at the Mandalay Bay Casino, and when the meet and greet was supposed to be happening. It then emerged that a flight out of Las Vegas to Newark had been booked in MJF's name. MJF didn't board said flight and stayed in Las Vegas. Throughout Sunday before Double or Nothing, AEW took down and then put back up the previews of his match against Wardlow, as there were still doubts over whether he would actually be showing up for the event. Then the match did happen. It opened the show. MJF was, well, we're going to talk about the match, whether it was a squash, whether it was a burial, whatever it was. Speculation was that he was being written out of AEW either permanently or at least until his situation with Tony Khan could be resolved. After the show, it emerged that MJF showed up at the last minute while the buy-in was going on. Like, he walked in as Hookhausen was getting the 1, 2, 3. This is how chaotic this show was. And me and you both know, when trying to put together shows, and we don't do it to that magnitude, but when trying to put together shows, when you're depending on somebody and it's a last minute thing, it can really stress you out and can really screw things up. So walks in during the buy-in match. He's basically not even, they call it the go position. It's not even called gorilla. When his music hits, he's not even in the go position. That's why there was a delay. He was still getting his ring gear on. That's how late he showed up. So he ends up coming out to the ring. We have the match, yada, yada, yada. In the post-show media scrum, Tony Khan declines to comment on the situation. PW Insider then reports that MJF is not expected to be attending AEW shows for at least several weeks, possibly longer. This all stems from a contract dispute from a couple of months ago that seems to have developed into more conflict between the two. Situation does not start out as work, but it appears both sides have come to an agreement, and they're working towards a resolution with each other. So basically, MJF's had a lot of anger and animosity that he's been carrying around with him towards Tony Khan, because Tony Khan's gone out and basically brought in all these ex-WWE guys, and all these guys are getting paid way more than him. I think you and I can both agree. On AEW, MJF is probably the biggest draw. He is the most interesting character they have. He is a guy that makes you stop, sit up, and watch everything he does. I'll be honest with you. CM Punk doesn't do that for me. I enjoy CM Punk, but I think MJF's a bigger draw than CM Punk. I love Kenny Omega. What I've gotten from Kenny Omega in AEW is not the same Kenny Omega that I got when he was in New Japan. So I don't necessarily sit up, stop, and everything revolves around whatever Kenny Omega is doing. But MJF is that one wrestler in AEW where I stop everything I'm doing and I pay such close attention to what he has going on. So MJF is pissed because he's not getting paid enough. He did get a raise earlier this year, but to him it was a bit of a slap in the face compared to what guys like CM Punk are making. CM Punk, obviously the highest grossing wrestler in AEW, and it does seem as though Tony Khan has a bit of a love affair with CM Punk. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on when we get into what took place on Rampage this week. All right, so that's kind of the foundation of what led into this match. Wardlow ends up squashing MJF. 10 power bombs in the Powerbomb Symphony. Ends up at 5, puts his foot on him. They get the 1-2, takes his foot off, and then he continues to deliver 5 more. This was basically how you and I would have booked this match. Okay, this is how we would have did it. At MJF or Wardlow is basically the one who's looking to be made the star here. When MJF gets stretchered out after the 1, 2, 3, he's put on a stretcher. They put a mask on over his face. I say over his face because it was not over his nose and mouth. It was over his nose and his eyeballs. And they basically squashed it down onto his face. When this match took place, this was a complete burial in my estimation. What did you make of what took place on in this match? And was there a little bit of retribution for what took place leading into it?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought the right character went over. Wardlow is an emerging star, and that's how you know. Also, too, MJF has a leg to stand on in that the work that he did to get Wardlow over also made it happen. So that's the part of a heel, is that when you look at characters and what makes wrestling companies work, the heel has to be the foil, the opposite of the face. And if you just have some nilly-dilly idiot doing their job and the babyface wins, there's no reaction. But genuinely speaking, people paid to see Wardlow kick MJF's ass. That's the story. That's the money. So if you're MJF and you're like, wait a minute, where's the respect that I get for the work that I've done? Now to help not only build my brand, but I've now basically worked to help you build Wardlow, which probably will pay off in return. That's the investment. And I get where MJF would be offended that, look, where's the return in love? Why are you making me jump through all these hoops for a contract? I have this number, pay it, and I'll return it in spades. And that part of it I understand in regards to personalities and people's ego, and they wonder, like, damn, you're going out and recruiting other people to come into this company to do work. I've been here. I've been laying the foundation. Now, this, in my mind, to summarize for me, my point of it, this was something that started off as a shoot that they just said with Chris Jericho, oh, great, we could turn this into a work. Everybody involved has been organized to orchestrate this. This is high-level work here in my mind. 2024 is a long time away. MJF is an egomaniac. He's not sitting out that long. This is an elaborate.
I want you to pause a little bit because I don't want you to go too deep into this right now.
Right.
Because I feel like there's a lot that we can unpack with what took place on Wednesday. So don't go too deep.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't mind where you're going,
I just think that this has been amazing work done by a wrestling company to get everybody to talk about them, to get everybody to focus, to get everybody to say, okay, this is something that is going down. And then what went down Wednesday was spectacular. So MJF deserves any penny that he deserves to go, look, pay me this, and for Tony to pay it. And whether or not it's a real fighting situation, we'll talk about it and dig into it further. But Wardlow is now a star, partly responsible as MJF, and kudos to him for, hey, showing up, doing the job, getting his ass kicked, and Wardlow, I can't wait to see what he does in the coming weeks.
Absolutely. It was the way it should have went. It took place, and we're going to get into Wardlow, or we're going to get into MJF a little bit later on in the show. Next match was the Hardys versus the Young Bucks. A really good match. I don't think this match quite hit the highs that it was expected and looked to hit. Now, some of that had to do with Jeff Hardy. Early in this match, Jeff Hardy gets hit and is almost knocked out of the match. Jeff Hardy suffered a really bad concussion. That's why he did not wrestle and was pulled from a match on Wednesday night's Dynamite. So this match, though a little wonky and a little clunky at times, was still really good. Factor in that Jeff Hardy, dealing with a concussion almost immediately as the match starts, is able to finish the match. Jeff Hardy, after the match, says that he doesn't remember hitting any of the swantons that he hit, doesn't remember basically anything from 2 minutes into the match. After that, it's all just kind of black to him. Doesn't remember none of it. So, again, really, really good match here with Jeff Hardy kind of being out of it for most of the match. Jade Cargill defeats Anna Jay via pinfall to retain her title. Now, this match, I think, was probably the worst match on the card. Anna Jay, obviously not ready for that primetime spot. Jade Cargill, I think, is still very rough around the edges. But what we got out of this, we ended up getting a debuting Malcolm Bevins from NXT. We also got Ember Moon, who's now known as Athena, debuting. And it looks as though Athena has set her sights on Jade Cargill. What did you make of this being the moment where you introduce these characters and bring in basically this new WWE blood that MJF has been so pissed off about?
Yeah. The crazy part was, obviously, I took a break away from the card at this point. I took okay, piss break time. So kind of, have it on intently for the first couple of matches. It's great, good action. And then Jade Cargill comes out and you're like, oh, okay. So you're passively watching. All of a sudden, something happened. I think the wife called or something happened, and I stepped away for a minute to go from the computer to my office to look at something, and all of a sudden I hear, oh, it's a debut, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm feverishly texting, like, who are these people? Because I didn't immediately recognize Athena from who she was. It was Ember Moon. Then I obviously understood. But the fun part is you can tell everybody, because I had no idea who Malcolm Bevins was. I don't know if he was on NXT. Everyone's like, oh, this is great. What a great get. I'm like, I never heard of this guy. I don't know what his character was. I don't know if he was NXT mainstay, and I just kept missing him. But I had no idea who he was. But obviously people were like, yes, this is a great get. And you'll have further notes on potentially his arrival. But I had no idea who that guy was, but I guess interesting that he has an opportunity to earn a spot. But I'm definitely interested in Athena, no doubt about it, because I think that that's a perfect foil for Jade Cargill to bring her down a notch.
Yeah, I like Ember Moon coming in / Athena coming in. I think she's going to help add some depth to that women's division. Now, Malcolm Bivens, he was the guy who was the leader of Diamond Mind. So in NXT, he was the guy who was basically Roderick Strong's, I guess, valet manager for his group Diamond Mine. That's where Malcolm Bivens comes in. He basically refused to sign his contract. We talked about him being let go a few weeks ago. He ended up refusing to sign his new contract, and because of that, WWE ended up letting him go and ushered him out when they had their last round of layoffs. So he ends up showing up in AEW, which is interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with him and Jade Cargill. I find it a little bit weird that we don't really have a resolution as to what took place with Smart Mark Sterling. Like, all of a sudden, Malcolm Bivens replaces Mark Sterling, and nobody has said anything. Like, there's no closure there. So I'm not sure what we're doing with that. Maybe that gets explained in the coming weeks. I'm not 100% sure. Now, House of Black defeats Death Triangle via pinfall. Julia Gulia is what we're going to call her now. She ends up getting involved. And I'll be honest with you, I thought this right here, this was a fantastic match. Probably the match of the night for me. Thought this was really, really good. You had some big dudes throwing around their body. You had some little dudes throwing around their body. It was absolutely great. It was set up for Death Triangle to get the win when Pac was on the top rope. All of a sudden, lights go out, and next thing you know, Julia Hart is in the ring and blows the black mist into Pac's eyes. House of Black gets the win. Thought this was really fantastic. Now, this is where you pull away in the predictions. You get these next two matches right, and I am left in the dust. Adam Cole defeats Samoa Joe via pinfall to win the men's Owen Hart Foundation tournament. Britt Baker defeats Ruby Soho to win the women's Owen Hart Foundation tournament. Were these the right two competitors to win this? And did you like that they're both a couple in real life and they both got to stand up there? I loved their ring gear, the hot pink ring gear, the stuff that Brett and Owen used to wear. I thought it was absolutely a fantastic homage to both of them. But were they the right people to win this belt?
Yeah, absolutely. They were the two most deserving. I just wish they would have let them talk a little bit after they won it. It kind of felt like the ceremony was a little bit disjointed in the organization of it, but it was cool. The belts, like, I don't know how I felt about the Owen Hart belt.
Here's the thing: the belts are, again, this is all an homage to Owen Hart. They're in the likeness of the old Stampede Wrestling belts. So where basically Owen Hart won his first championship.
Exactly. But in today's age, it just didn't pop the way that when you see the AEW TNT belts and they got the colors and thing there, it's a little bit dated. And I guess, you could still bring the likeness of it, but bring it up to date to 2022. But that's just nitpicking. Great matches, enjoyed them, and the right people won.
All right. So then after that, we get Scorpio Sky, Ethan Page, and Paige Van Zant versus Sammy Guevara, Frankie Kazarian, and Ty Conti. I thought this match was kind of a waste. Paige Van Zant obviously needs some work on her in-ring work. She's very new to this. She's just kind of working through things. Does not necessarily deserve to be on a pay-per-view of this magnitude at this time.
Exactly. I highlighted this as the worst match because it had no ring psychology to it. It was like spot.
There was none.
A little bit of a botch, a little bit of moves. It made no sense. It was disjointed, and you're like, wait a minute. This kind of looks like a match that they've shown on Wednesdays. Whoa, this was not pay-per-view caliber. This match, based on what was done, you could have potentially put it in the buy-in in the beginning.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree with that. It was because there was nothing really there. Like, what you ended up having was you had 5 heels and you had Frankie Kazarian. That's what you had. A whole lot of it didn't make sense. We do have some news on Sammy Guevara and Ty Conti. Stick around for that. I'm going to just kind of skip through this one because I didn't enjoy this match at all. I don't think you need to waste your time watching it. Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page and Paige Van Zant get the win. At this point, Sammy Guevara nor Frankie Kazarian can challenge for the TNT Championship. Now we get Kyle O'Reilly defeating Darby Allin via pinfall. I think that was a little bit of a surprise. I think we all expected Darby Allin to win this match, but he did not. Kyle O'Reilly ends up winning it. Thunder Rosa defeats Serena Deeb via pinfall to retain her title. I thought this was a little bit of a clunky match. I did not think this was as crisp or as smooth or as good as it should have been. And I don't know if this falls on Thunder Rosa. I don't know if this falls on Serena Deeb. I don't know where this necessarily, where the fault lies. What I do know is that Thunder Rosa's time as champion hasn't been very good, and AEW hasn't really invested a lot of resources into it. And at this point, Thunder Rosa has been very vocal, and she is very upset about where she's at in the company with this championship. To me, it seems very weird because we don't have any direction for her right now. Like, I don't know who her next competitor is. I don't know who her next challenger is. There's nobody there to basically step in and challenge Thunder Rosa right now. And they're not doing anything with her. When we have a major pay-per-view and then the following week we don't see her on TV at all, that's a bit of a red flag for me. And I don't think AEW knows what to do with her. I don't feel like AEW has invested the same resources in her as they did in Britt Baker. Again, I thought this was a bit of a clunky match. Did you have any thoughts on this Thunder Rosa Serena Deep match?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in lockstep with what you're saying. My notes were just who's next. Thunder Rosa just isn't at the level where you need a champion to be. So you got to just find the next lady to build up. Maybe have Thunder Rosa win a feud here and there in the meantime. But yeah, I'm just waiting for who's next. I'm not impressed at all. Thunder Rosa, more in line with a TNT champion in her role than a world champion. She's not, like, nobody's going to pay a ticket to go see Thunder Rosa. And that's a problem when you invest that much in a character. And that's the bottom line.
All right, so for me, I know earlier I said House of Black, Death Triangle, probably the match of the night for me. That actually takes a backseat to this match. This next match was arguably the best and most chaotic thing I've seen on a pay-per-view, on television, anywhere since probably an old school ECW match that I used to watch on WADL back when it would come on at 2 a.m. I'd stay up super late to watch ECW when I was a kid. The Jericho Appreciation Society defeats Eddie Kingston, Santana Ortiz, Bryan Danielson, and Jon Moxley via submission. This match was bananas. I love the way the Jericho Appreciation Society came out. They looked like a boy band. They were wearing all white. I think the all white looked great when they bled all over it because there was blood everywhere. Eddie Kingston looked like an absolute deranged lunatic. There was a point where Jericho's in the ring and Danielson's got him in a submission move, and Kingston comes from the back with a gallon of gas and dumps gas all over everybody and is ready to set the entire ring on fire. This leads to Danielson and Kingston throwing what looked like legit blows on each other, only for Moxley to try to break this up, which put Jon Moxley in a bit of a bad position because Eddie Kingston's his boy and Bryan Danielson's his partner. So bit of a storyline there. And this is a match where you don't necessarily get storylines. You have Santana and Ortiz doing moves off top ropes that are very reminiscent to old school ECW maneuvers. This match was nuts. There was a point where Jon Moxley picked up a full cooler and just winged it at Chris Jericho. There was a part where a boom mic was used. The jib cam was moved. And if you don't know what a jib cam is, it's basically the stationary camera that is opposite of the ring. It's the one that basically shows you what you're watching on TV. It's a large piece of equipment that has this big arm that kind of can move in a little bit more than 180 degrees. And if you get hit with it, it's going to hurt. There were points in this match where both Jon Moxley, Bryan Danielson, and Chris Jericho, veterans, had this look on their face of like, what the fuck are we doing in this match right now? Why are we doing this? Absolutely bonkers. There was a fork used. I think what ends up happening is Jon Moxley just runs around with a fork in his pocket, and whenever he needs to stab somebody, he just stabs them. I thought this match was absolutely fantastic. What did you make of this match?
Oh, Anarchy in the Arena. What a great title, right? Absolutely fabulous. It was intriguing. It was entertaining. It was jaw-dropping. It was fun. It was crazy. It was what everybody wanted. And the best part were the fans were just eating it up. Like the performers had them in the palm of their hands. And that's what you want when you're a performer. You want to have the crowd into it. You want to have everything go in that direction. But I'll ask you this. I guess I understand the need to have the Jericho Appreciation Society win one of these aggressive kind of matches. But for me, I just felt like at this point in time, when you look at it and you see what's going on with everything and where the performers are, I might have had Moxley and Santana and Ortiz and Danielson win it. I thought maybe that group together, could do something moving forward and maybe it would benefit more than what a loss to the Jericho crew would mean. So having Jericho win it's fine. I get it. You have a wizard. You have a group that's also trying to take off. But it was interesting because I just thought maybe the wrong team went over.
On this card, there were a couple of wins that took place that I don't necessarily think made, at least it just didn't make sense to me, right? So like this match, the Jericho Appreciation Society, I thought for sure were taking the L. I thought Eddie Kingston, Santana Ortiz, Bryan Danielson, and Jon Moxley, this match set up perfectly for them to win. You look at the Kyle O'Reilly Darby Allin match, I know it was thrown on the card at the last minute, but I thought Darby Allin was going to come away with the victory. He did not. You had the Scorpio Sky, Ethan Page, Paige Van Zandt versus Sammy Guevara, Frankie Kazarian, and Ty Conti match. I thought that there was going to be some DQ where Sammy Guevara, Frankie Kazarian, and Ty Conti end up winning, but instead it was a clean win for Scorpio Sky, Ethan Page, and Paige Van Zandt. So this card had a little bit of shock and awe to it. It didn't necessarily set up the way that we thought it was going to set up and play out, but I like that. I think what ends up happening is now you can build a bigger, grander story for the Jericho Appreciation Society with all these different individuals, with Eddie Kingston, Santana Ortiz, Danielson, and Moxley. So I think it sets up nicely. This next match was kind of similar. Neither one of us thought that Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus were going to retain. Instead, Team Taz and Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland, they ended up losing, while Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy end up coming out the victors. So I think you got a lot of that with this card, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. It's just it was this card ended up going a little bit left when we thought it was going to go right,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think moving forward, both groups, man, when you have a violent match like that, keep trying to top it. Whew, my goodness. But now we get to the main event, man. I'm curious to get your thoughts about it.
Yeah, so CM Punk ends up defeating Hangman Page to win via pinfall. I don't know if this is the right move. I don't know if this is the right direction. And when we talked last week, we both felt like Hangman Page's title reign, it felt a little hollow, felt a little vacant. It didn't necessarily have that big win. Didn't necessarily have any of that gusto, any of that pizzazz. It felt like it was missing something. So for CM Punk to defeat him, it just kind of confirms everything that we felt. And it almost feels as though Hangman Page was just this long-term transitional champion because he never had that signature moment. I feel that if he would have beat CM Punk, that would have been his signature moment. You invested 2 years into Hangman Page with that Kenny Omega storyline, and you go all the way back to the very first time they had Double or Nothing. Hangman Page challenged Chris Jericho for the championship title. That's how long you've been building Hangman Page for. And you never, in his title reign, you never had that moment where you're like, yeah, that was the right move. It always kind of felt like, maybe not. I can't tell you one signature match that Hangman Page had. His best match came on TV, came on Dynamite, and it was against Takahashi, or whatever his name is, a couple of weeks ago. I totally got the name wrong, and that's fine. That's his biggest match of his career, his best match of his career, and that was the build towards this CM Punk match. I don't know if it was the right move putting the belt on CM Punk at this time. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Should Hangman Page should have came away the victor here?
Well, in the realm of creativeness, in the realm of character development, it's the wrong move. Adam Hangman Page is the champion, and now where does he go from here after a loss to an older individual who couldn't even execute the moves properly? Not once, but twice, CM Punk failed to execute the buckshot lariat and his knees gave out. That's not a good look for the guy that is being portrayed as the best in the world. Follows it up with something else on Wednesday that was eye-grabbing. So you look at it and you say, okay, this is where the debate that you and I have always had and wrestling companies will always have: money versus creativeness and character development. Bottom line, Tony Khan, the executives of television, they got together and said, who makes us the most money? Who's the most box office draw that we could potentially tour over the next 6 months with? And that would be CM Punk. Basically, in essence, it was a WWE decision. They went with who's going to put the ass in the seats, not who's the best wrestler. Okay, you and I are more are more old school and hardcore and say the guy that should hold the belt should be the best wrestler, a la Bret Hart, a la Shawn Michaels, the guy that can put asses in seats, a la Seth Rollins. Whereas Vince, Tony, even though they may feud, even though they may act like they're different people in terms of how they treat people, they're cut from the same cloth, which is which character, Brock Lesnar, CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Jon Moxley, which character is going to put asses in seats, make us money? You don't invest, and I think that's where you and I were short-sighted. Otherwise, we would have easily said CM Punk. You invest that much in a contract in CM Punk, and you put him in a match, he's not losing. So, but you and I both realize you did that at the detriment of Adam Hangman Page, which we don't really respect a whole heck of a lot because the man can work, but you didn't give him anything to work with. The time to do something like that would have been to have Adam Hangman Page beat CM Punk. And then CM Punk come back, maybe take a little time off, come back a little bit fitter, stronger. You avoid all this nonsense with the trios and the FTR, which is nonsense and a huge distraction. And then when CM Punk beats Adam Page, it even means more. Maybe even a second loss. But one more time, I got to do it. Like Rocky, you could even bring up different type of elements as to why CM Punk keeps getting these opportunities. But in the end, it's the bottom line, man. In a wrestling company that invests millions into a guy, he's going to win the title. But I thought it was the wrong decision. I would have liked to have seen Adam Hangman Page win it. But listen, I'm still clapping. And of course, you're still like, oh, watching all the videos with CM Punk. That's just the way it is. Style over substance sometimes makes the money. And that's the way it went this go around.
And I think this is the perfect jumping off point for talking about what took place on Wednesday on Dynamite. So you now put the belt on CM Punk. He is your highest grossing, and by grossing, I mean he's paid the most money by Tony Khan in AEW. And that basically leads to a ton of credence from MJF and with what he said. His promo went so hard. And I don't know how much retribution there's going to be for AEW, because a lot of the curse words that were beeped out here were not beeped out over in Canada. So when he goes off on that verbal tirade where he just starts cussing and cutting into Tony Khan and effing him up one way and effing him down the other and tells him he wants him to fire him, which, look, I love this promo. I sat there with my mouth open. I was shocked. If there's one thing you need to watch this week, one thing, only one thing, you need to go watch the MJF promo. It was great. It is referred to as the pipe bomb promo. I think this has a little bit more, there's more anger in this than what you got with CM Punk. CM Punk seemed more calculated, more thought out. This is straight raw emotion. And I think what we ended up getting with this promo, because originally when we were talking in our group chat, I thought this was real. I thought this was real life. And then as we kind of worked through it, and you really take a step back and you think about it, I think this promo was probably 95% real. I think everything he said is what he feels, and everything that he said is what he believes. But I think this was orchestrated in such a way where Tony Khan and MJF came to an agreement. They're like, let's make money on this. And in our group, I said, this to me almost feels like it is the Montreal Screwjob mixed with Stone Cold Steve Austin. And what I mean by that is you've got a character who is going up against the man. Stone Cold Steve Austin went up against Vince McMahon. And you've got a company who does not necessarily appreciate the wrestler. And that's where the Montreal Screwjob kind of comes in. And I feel like it's all kind of balled up into this one big combustible package. And it's so interesting and it's so gripping. It is so weird to me that you end up putting MJF out there, you let all these things kind of go, you let him say all these things, and he basically he railed on the company that you have spent 3 years trying to build. He railed on this company. He even calls out WWE by name. He calls out former wrestlers from WWE, basically pointing fingers at those wrestlers. This is a guy who says, I don't want to wait till 2024. I want you to fire me now, and calls Tony Khan a mark. And I do believe Tony Khan is a mark. I do. At this point, Tony Khan gets me worked up because I think the whole thing with putting the belt on CM Punk, if you ever watch the way he interacts with anybody else and the way he interacts with CM Punk, it's gross. It is absolutely gross. He loves CM Punk so much. And I think that's where some of this vitriol from MJF comes from, because MJF is a guy who puts butts in seats. I already told you, I'm just a regular old wrestling fan. I tend to be a little bit more up on stuff because I do this show. That is it. I'm just a regular guy who shows up, pays money, will wear a T-shirt, and will drink the beer, will sip the Kool-Aid, will do all the things. Just the guy. MJF is the guy who puts butts in seats. CM Punk, I don't necessarily care about CM Punk. CM Punk, when he came out, when he debuted, I was like, yeah, this is cool. But you know what? There was no surprise because it was talked about. CM Punk has been very vocal about how much money he needed to come and do wrestling again. That doesn't do it for me. You don't necessarily want to be there. You want the paycheck. That's what that says to me. MJF is the guy. He is the guy. And I feel like this promo really showed you that he is wrestling. He is wrestling. This promo started with the crowd basically chanting F you or go F yourself. And in the end, people were cheering him. And that's one way to flip a crowd on its head. And I don't know where AEW goes from here, because I don't know who MJF can face, because it's obvious that he is the people's champ. Okay? He's a heel, but he is the people's champ. So who do you put him up against? Do you put him up against CM Punk? Because if you do that, MJF is going to be the face. CM Punk is going to be the heel. I don't know if there's another guy in this company, because you have now built a mega heel. You have built a mega star. I don't know if there is a guy in a company in the rest of the world who could challenge MJF right now and keep him heel while you stay babyface. I don't know what AEW does here. I think they have painted themselves in a really bad corner. What did you make of the MJF promo?
Ooh, I watched it twice. It was so good. Now, I don't know who it harkened back to. I know you talked about the different storylines. I just saw old school Ric Flair. Like, the dude watched Ric Flair. And when he started screaming, like, the part that got me goosebumps was the part where he said, all these guys you brought in here can't lace my boots, because he screamed it at the part where his veins were going to pop out. And you knew he believed it. You knew, and this is a guy that's living his gimmick and is believable. This is great. That's the best character, is a guy that you know is just him, but dialed up to a 10. And when he said, these guys can't lace my boots, was great. A great line. And I just, basically, the best way to put it is, I want to see what happens. When MJF's music hits, you want to tune in. You stop everything and you highlight it and you say, I want to see it. And that's what a wrestler should do. All this contract, money, all that stuff, listen, I don't care how much really a wrestler makes and stuff like that. So all the contract stuff is not something that I really put a lot into personally. Like, okay, in the end, it's billionaires arguing with potential millionaires. And when you're going from a couple hundred, I know when you're going from a couple $100K to millions, it's a lot to these guys, but you're in a great position. You're in a great company. He ain't getting fired. It's a great work with the potential that started off as a shoot, and it'll make money. And that's where the stories are best made, is when potentially that MJF is not happy that he's not the highest paid, which he shouldn't be. He should not. That's what you want. I don't want a guy on my roster, if you're the boss, that's just going to be there. You want a guy that wants to kind of fight to be the best. You want a guy that's going to say, hey, I'd rather have a guy that's in my office 24/7 than a guy that I have to chase down to talk to. So MJF is great, total package. I just think that to take the next step, he just needs a running mate at his level. Like, Sean Spears is not at his level. So you need the it factor. Like, if you could just steal Paul Heyman and give him to MJF, now you're going to print millions and just go all over the country. You need the Paul Heyman for MJF to potentially ease up a little bit, because remember, the kid's 26. Is he going to scream for the next 20 years? You do need it where when he talks, it's worthwhile, because now we've seen it for 3 years. The man can scream. So now you got to take it to a level where you go, maybe a side piece can advocate a little bit for him in a creative way as well, and let his wrestling do some talking as well. I can't wait to see it. And that's the best part, is when you're like, oh boy, what's going to happen next? That's box office, baby.
All right, well, let's transition to what ended up taking place, the big story coming out of Rampage then. CM Punk has a match on Dynamite, a little clunky. I even said I feel like some of CM Punk's matches are sloppy. And there was a spot where there was supposed to be this power bomb into Billy Gunn, who was on the outside of the ring, on the outside of the ropes, and it basically falls short. And at that moment, it didn't look like CM Punk was 100%, and it turns out he broke a bone in his foot. And you could see on Rampage, he ends up making his way down to the ring, and he's moving incredibly slow, and he's all teary-eyed. Looks like he'd been crying in the back for probably about 6 hours, and comes out and basically says, I have a broken foot. I've got to go away for a while. I've offered to vacate the title. But Tony Khan loves to suck my dick so much that I'm going to hold on to my title, even though I can't defend my title. This pisses me off, by the way. I'm going to hold on to my title, even though I can't defend my title. And when I come back, we'll have a unification match. Like, wait, what? What? So you put the strap on a guy who gets broken, and basically the following match, after you put the strap on him, got a bum foot. It's a broken foot. You and I both know this just from covering sports. Broken foot doesn't necessarily heal really quickly. Generally, the bone's going to take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to heal, and then you got to rehab it because you can't just go jumping and bouncing off of it. So you're looking at a guy who's going to be out for at least 3 to 6 months. You probably won't see CM Punk back until sometime in October, November, maybe December, possibly January, depending on how his rehab goes. Remember, he's a little bit older. In the meantime, we're going to crown an interim champion. And there's going to be this match where guys are going to compete, and then they're going to go up against Jon Moxley because Jon Moxley is the number one contender. What? To me, this feels very, very like, and I understand you're doing all this stuff last second. You generally don't have a backup plan when you just put the belt on a brand new champion. It just doesn't. You just don't plan like that. It's not how things work. But this feels very much like WWE creative to me. You have a belt on the guy that you want the belt to obviously be on. That is CM Punk. And now you're going to leave the belt on him, but you're going to bring in another champion in the meantime. It feels very WWE, very UFC to me, because UFC has a lot of interim champions like this. How would you go about booking this new AEW champ? Because I'm not letting CM Punk run around with my belt. I'm not having 2 championship belts because in my estimation, it devalues what that belt means. And that belt has been built on the backs of guys like Chris Jericho, who you know I'm a huge fan of and I appreciate, and he is my number one wrestler of all time. On the backs of guys like Jon Moxley, who has bled all over this place for this company. On the backs of guys like Kenny Omega, who has taken that belt to stratospheric levels by going and wrestling all over the world and defending that belt all over the world. Something that usually doesn't happen with a world championship. WWE belts don't get defended in other places. He is a champion of WWE. AEW, that belt has been defended in Impact. That belt has been defended in AAA. That belt has been defended over in Japan. That belt has been defended everywhere. And then even on the backs of guys like Hangman Page, for whatever it's worth. I don't let that belt stay on CM Punk. CM Punk has to vacate that championship. When you come back and you're healthy enough and you can show that you're healthy enough, you'll be the first guy in line because that was your belt. You can come back and you can wrestle for it, and we'll see what happens from there. But I'm not letting you keep your belt. How would you go about booking this new AEW champ?
Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy, right? It's probably going to be Moxley. I think that's a great opportunity to have the next best guy, or Danielson. It really is going to depend on the timeline of when Punk's going to return. Mm-hmm. If you want to, I'm not exactly sure the details because it was wonky. Is the winner of that? So the Tanahashi match is off. Is that correct?
So whoever wins, whoever's going to be the champion will face Tanahashi. Is the way it's
because I would have had it where Tanahashi just gets the belt and you keep him around for a little bit, and then you just have CM Punk take on Tanahashi. You had the match.
Dude, I think that would be great.
That'd be great. Or if you don't do that, then you just have either Danielson or Moxley. It's going to be one of those two in my mind, and you just go at it. This
is what's weird to me too about what Tony Khan does. You'll have these working relationships with these other companies, but none of these other companies ever get wins over his wrestlers. You know, like we talked about this weeks ago when William Morrissey was brought in, and Wardlow beat him, and Wardlow beat him soundly and beat him quickly, and that match felt like it should have been more of a slugfest, should have been a little bit more back and forth, and it really wasn't. It seemed a little bit lopsided. I love what you're saying. Put the belt on Tanahashi. Work out a deal with New Japan where Tanahashi can stay here and defend that championship for a while. Let Tanahashi be your guy. Let him hold that strap. Let him go to New Japan. Let him defend that belt there. Do that. Get your belt out there. Get your belt some credence. Get your company some worldwide views. Do that. And then when CM Punk comes back, those guys can have a match. And that would be sweet. I love that idea. I think that's a fantastic idea. All right, we are running incredibly long here. Let's jump into WWE real quick. Up and down, go home show for Hell in the Cell. I don't think there was anything absolutely awful, but I don't necessarily think that this really was the best build either for Monday Night Raw or for SmackDown for a pay-per-view that is supposed to be heavily pushed. I think the best thing coming out of Monday Night Raw, the Seth Rollins promo on Cody Rhodes was unbelievable.
That's what I started, and that's what I put. And look, we're actually doing not that bad on time. We're going to naturally go over, but we're still 180 seconds under the limit that we set for ourselves, but we're doing just fine. Baby, that's the blessing of podcast, is you can go over. There's no hard outs. No one's behind the scenes going to push a button and play music on us, baby. There ain't no Tony Khan going to be cutting off no Thunder Rosa. We're going to have some major issues. But you're absolutely right. In the spirit of it, I thought this was going to be an AEW heavy podcast because what I liked this week, to be honest, what intrigued me, is different, but I really like kind of having Drew McIntyre having worked with the New Day because there is that little sprinkling of what could happen there. Could Drew McIntyre turn? Is there going to be something there? Riddle and Nakamura was cool to see in a tag team match. So I was intrigued, but you're absolutely right. The highlight of the week for WWE was Cody and Seth, and it was awesome. It was amazing.
Yeah, highlights Seth Rollins basically saying, you don't get to come back here after you leave for 6 years, after you take a sledgehammer and you destroy the throne that I sit on. Like I thought that was great, and that goes back to when Cody Rhodes came out with a sledgehammer, a la Triple H, and destroyed the throne that Triple H sits on. It pointed to so many AEW things that Cody Rhodes did.
It was nice because
it was absolutely fantastic.
It's nice because WWE's listening, saying, "Look, we don't have to act like there's not people watching something else." Yep. When you talk about it, people go ooh and ah. The biggest ooh and ah from AEW was MJF saying WWE. So that was cool. Yep.
It's I think WWE is having a little bit of a loosening, and I think this might be a Cody Rhodes influence on WWE, where they're allowing wrestlers to acknowledge what other guys have done in other places, because usually WWE, it's whatever you've done in WWE, and that is pretty much it. By the way, this goes back to AEW. Did you pick up the line where the Jericho Appreciation Society basically said it was the AEW Galaxy, kind of like the WWE Universe?
Yeah,
I thought that was really, really cool. I thought that was neat. So I thought that was the best thing on Monday Night Raw. Other than that, I thought Raw was, like I said, it was kind of whatever it was. I didn't think it was a great go-home show. I think the big thing coming out of SmackDown, and this is something you and I talked about, and this is something you and I wanted, because this guy has a look. He looks like he could be a physical, dominant freak show. Madcap Moss, we think the name is stupid. Madcap Moss gets repackaged. What did you think of this rebranding of Madcap Moss? Because I thought what we ended up getting was very reminiscent of a Ken Shamrock with those tights, the black wrapped wrists. I mean, he was missing. The only thing he was missing was the actual gloves, the MMA gloves that Ken Shamrock used to come to the ring with. He has he looks physically dominating. On top of that, he was enraged. You haven't seen that. This guy is a guy who basically just laughs at everything, gets hit in the head and he laughs. This guy was ready to F up every WWE official that was in the ring on Friday night. What did you think of Madcap Moss repackage?
It was perfect. Finally, something maybe where he had some influence and got it done. It makes it more believable that he can be somebody that can be taken seriously, right? What's the best thing they can do for him now moving forward?
I think so. Obviously, we're going to talk about it, but he's going to be in a match on Sunday in Hell in the Cell. I think that needs to be an incredibly violent match where he comes away the winner. And I think what you have to do is you have to continue to build on this aggression, on this unseen side, easy for me to say, unseen side of Madcap Moss, where he is almost ruthless. He can almost be like a bipolar type character, right? Where one moment he can be laughing, and then the next moment he's incredibly serious, and he is ready to get in your face and F you up. And I think that would make for a really compelling, interesting character. I don't think we've ever seen somebody like that, where it's like, yeah, we're having a good time, everything's great. Wait, hold on. You said what? And then just in your face and ready to throw hands. I think that would be really, really interesting for Madcap Moss. I think it takes his character in a different direction, kind of holds on to a little bit of that laughter and that funny guy, but really points him in a brand new direction that makes him a little bit more lethal and a little bit more deadly. You want to get into these predictions?
Let's do it. Hell in a Cell, Sunday, baby.
All right. Hell in a Cell is on Sunday. Get it off Peacock, or if you have a website that you can stream it from, get it from there as well. We've got Cody Rhodes taking on Seth freaking Rollins in a Hell in the Cell match. Now, this will be the third time these guys matched up, and Cody Rhodes is 2-0 at this point. I don't know where we go. I don't know who we pick. I want to know what your thoughts are, and how do you think this plays out?
You can't derail Cody Rhodes, so you just have to have Cody Rhodes have a violent match. It'll be Cody Rhodes going over. It has to be.
So Cody Rhodes goes over. We can finally move on from this Seth Rollins storyline then? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes. Something else. What's next?
All right. I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to go Cody Rhodes, and I think we move on from the Seth Rollins storyline. Maybe we set up for Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns. Maybe we set up Cody Rhodes, I don't know, somebody a little bit bigger. Obviously, Seth Rollins is the biggest heel on Monday Night Raw right now when Roman Reigns is not there. Now we've got Bianca Belair defending her championship against Asuka and Becky Lynch in a triple threat match for the WWE Raw Women's Championship. I think Bianca Belair retains her title. I think after this, we get a new Becky Lynch, and I think Asuka continues to be Asuka because Vince McMahon likes when she screams and is whatever. So
yeah, I agree.
I got Bianca Belair winning this.
I agree.
All right, Bobby Lashley versus Omos and MVP. It's a 2-on-1 handicap match. Remember that MVP got to pick the stipulation. This match looks to be absolutely horrible because Omos can't wrestle. Who do you got winning this one?
Bobby Lashley, baby. He has to get over.
All right, I'll go Bobby Lashley as well. In my head, this just kind of makes sense, right? Because MVP picked the stipulation. Bobby Lashley should win, right? Almost can't wrestle. MVP. There's going to be something here. I think you end up using MVP against Omos in this match, and I think MVP's got to do some explaining on Monday night. Ezekiel versus Kevin Owens in a singles match. I'm going to go Ezekiel on this one.
Oh man, Ezekiel getting over. I can't. I mean, come on, man. The guy wearing pink getting over on Kevin Owens. That would be. I would be disappointed at that. I got to go with Kevin Owens. I got to go opposite of you.
All right. Austin Theory defends his U.S. championship versus Mustafa Ali. Man, I would love to see Mustafa Ali win this, but I don't think that's happening. I think the Golden Boy retains his title.
Absolutely. Austin Theory.
All right. Finn Balor, AJ Styles, and Liv Morgan versus the Judgment Day. 6-person mixed tag match. How do you see this one playing out?
Judgment Day has been running wild, huh? Interesting group. Yeah. I love I love Edge, Adam Copeland, as they call him. I love the fact that he keeps posting pictures of different wrestlers, and I think Cody Rhodes got on there in one of his tweets, but I think the Judgment Day is going to get over.
Yeah, I think it's the Judgment Day as well. Don't be surprised if we end up getting the introduction of a new character at this pay-per-view. I don't know who it would be, and I don't really have any idea who it might be, but I would not be surprised if they added a fourth member, and that fourth member was brought in on this pay-per-view and helped get the win over Finn Balor, AJ Styles, and Liv Morgan. You talked about it before. Maybe it's Finn Balor. You brought that up. Who knows? Madcap Moss versus Happy Corbin. There's a no-holds-barred match. I think we both are going to pick Madcap Moss for this one.
Absolutely. Madcap, keep getting him over, keep building his brand.
All right. So I hold a 4-point lead after you dominated the pants off of me last week. It is now 6.5 to 2.5 in the predictions. We both have Madcap. We both have the Judgment Day. We both have Austin Theory. We both have Bobby Lashley. We both have Bianca Belair. We both have Cody Rhodes. The one pick where we differ and the one that will sway the victory for one of us, Kevin Owens, Ezekiel. We'll see who wins that match. That might be the opener. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But it all takes place this Sunday on the Peacock Network, or like I said before, if you know an app or a website that you can stream it, get it from there. You ready for some news and notes?
Hit me at this week's professional wrestling news and notes. What made the list?
So more fallout from the Sasha Banks-Naomi walkout. Former WWE Women Tag Team Champion Sasha Banks and Naomi reportedly aren't being paid during their indefinite suspension from WWE. According to Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, it is possible that Banks and Naomi could go months or longer without pay due to WWE's right to freeze their contract. Meltzer is unsure if WWE intends to do that, but if the company freezes their contracts, they might not be paid unless or until they return to programming. Speaking of suspensions, is MJF getting put in the penalty box? So this kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. MJF was not supposed to be on AEW programming for the foreseeable future after what took place this past weekend in Las Vegas for Double or Nothing. Now, he was at TV on Monday, and after that, AEW has pulled all of MJF's stuff off of the Shop AEW store. MJF has been removed from the roster list. MJF appears at this moment in time to be suspended and will be absent from TV for at least the next several TV tapings. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what takes place with MJF going forward. Obviously, it sounds like there's something that's been worked out between Tony Khan and MJF. But at this moment in time, the way AEW has this set up, it appears as though MJF is suspended. Now, the WWE Women's Tag Team titles, they may be dead. In the latest Naomi and Sasha Banks were probably right news on Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer reported that the plans for the vacated WWE Women's Tag Team Title Championship tournament are officially dead. The fact that Banks and Naomi walked out over creative differences with management over the treatment of the tag titles, only to have WWE then walk back plans to hold a tournament to decide new champions, essentially proves the disgruntled talent's point. The company had been so non-committal on the tag titles since their inception in 2018 that nothing regarding its lack of foresight in regards to them is a surprise at all. The belts just might be scrapped altogether. Now, originally they were planning a 4-team tag match, including people from NXT, SmackDown, and Raw. The winner would end up getting the belts, and they would have to obviously defend them on all brands. It sounds like they're just going to get rid of them, period, which might just be the best thing because the women's division is so thin and it's awful anyways. This week marks Michael Cole's 25th year at the desk in WWE. DocNJock congratulate him on his 25-year achievement. Michael Cole, certain points in his wrestling career, was the ultimate heel, and everybody hated Michael Cole. I think at this point, you and I both agree Michael Cole is pretty damn good at what he does. Whether you like what he says or whether you don't like what he says, Michael Cole is pretty good at what he does, especially after seeing some of the guys who have taken over that desk and didn't hold it for very, very long. Bray Wyatt teases a return to the ring. On Tuesday, he tweeted, "Patience, it's almost time." Not sure what that means, but Hell in the Cell is this weekend, so maybe he goes back to WWE. Not really positive. Was thinking he might show up on AEW. Bray Wyatt's probably just playing with all of us at this point. And big couples news. We'll get out of here on this. The wrestling world's favorite couple, AEW's Sammy Guevara and Ty Conti, are now engaged after Guevara proposed at the Eiffel Tower on Friday. The news was just broke exclusively by TMZ. The 26-year-old Conti wore a mauve pink rose gold colored dress while Sammy sported a green suit, white shirt, and a paisley green tie. They looked stunning. Of course, Ty managed to show off the new rock her future hubby got her while Sammy held the Brazilian wrestler in his arms with a massive smile. Guevara and Conti have been together since last year, and their relationship was the center of some attention after Guevara had only proposed to his ex-girlfriend of several years a few months earlier on AEW television, and then gave her the boot because he started banging Ty Conti. And that's going to do it for this week's wrestling news and notes.
Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Anywhere you listen and download your favorite broadcasts and podcasts, type in Detroit Sports Podcast, and our content will find you. As the pay-per-view is going on, if anything hits you, you really like it, you really want to get in, message us at Detroit Podcast. We love reading and engaging in everything that goes on in the world of professional wrestling. As you know, as AEW now gets closer to making their debut in Detroit on the 29th, we'll look at what potentially could happen, potentially some more violence on the way in Detroit. Interesting there. Thanks, everybody, for listening and downloading the latest edition of the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast. Can't wait to break down what happened at Hell in a Cell. Usually always one or two great spots that leave us going, holy crap. And I can't wait to see and observe what goes on next week on the latest edition of the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast.